This chimney has no fan, no compressor, no wiring, and no monthly bill. It moves air through your house using nothing but sunlight and the height of the shaft. And the physics behind it is so straightforward that a builder in ancient Persia understood it before anyone had a word for thermodynamics. But if it's that simple, the question is, why the majority of people who try building one end up with a warm, stagnant tube sitting on their roof doing nothing? The answer comes down to two numbers, and those two numbers are the whole video. Before I get into those numbers, I should tell you who I am. My name is Tolliver. I spent about 30 years running mechanical plant for hospitals, a mill, a school district, big boilers, big chillers, big air handlers. Nothing I did required a license, and I'm not offering you advice. I'm just telling you what the physics does, because a house is the same problem in a smaller box. And most of what gets said about it online is wrong. So, a solar chimney. Some people call it a thermal chimney, some call it a stack ventilation tower, but the function is the same in every case. It's a vertical channel, usually attached to the south-facing wall of a building, with a glazed surface on one side to let sunlight in, and a dark absorber surface on the other to soak that sunlight up. The absorber is typically painted black or finished in a dark selective coating, and the material behind it is usually concrete, brick, or stone, something heavy enough to hold heat. The air inside the channel sits between the glass and that dark wall. Sunlight passes through the glass, strikes the absorber, and the absorber converts that light into heat. The trapped air warms up, and when air heats up, it expands. When it expands, it gets lighter per cubic foot than the cooler air sitting inside your living room. That lighter air rises and exits through the top of the chimney. This is the exact same principle that drove the Persian bad gear wind catchers you can still see standing in Yazd, Iran. Towers built as far back as 3,400 years ago to ventilate homes in one of the hottest inhabited deserts on Earth. The Persians didn't have the equation. They had observation. They knew that a tall, sun-heated tower pulls air, and here is the part that makes the whole thing work. As that heated air leaves through the top, it creates a pressure drop at the bottom of the shaft. That pressure drop pulls cooler air from inside the house into the chimney to replace what just left. And because your house has windows or intake vents on the shaded side, fresh outside air gets drawn in through those openings to replace the air that just got pulled into the chimney. You've now got airflow moving through your entire house with zero electricity. The sun does the work. The chimney is the engine. That engine has a name in building science. It's called the stack effect. Engineers have been studying it for over a century, and the equation that describes it is not complicated. The pressure difference created by a stack equals the height of the stack multiplied by the difference in air density between the outside and the inside, multiplied by gravitational acceleration. Height times density gap times gravity. But density is hard to measure in your backyard, so the version most builders use swaps density difference for temperature difference. And that swap is what gives you the two numbers that matter. Number one is stack height. The taller the chimney, the more pressure difference it generates. This scales in a straight line. A chimney that's 20 feet tall produces roughly 3 times the draft of one that's 7 feet tall, assuming the same temperature gap. The ASHRAE Handbook of Fundamentals, which is the standard reference for every HVAC engineer in America, treats height as a direct multiplier on pressure. Double the height, double the force pulling air through your house. Number 2 is the temperature gap between the air inside the chimney and the air inside the room it's connected to. The wider that gap, the greater the density difference and the stronger the draft. A solar chimney sitting in direct sun on a July afternoon in Phoenix might see air temperatures inside the channel hit 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, while the room it's venting sits around 77. That's a 60 to 80 degree differential, and it produces real, measurable airflow. Researchers at a pilot station in China built a 26-foot tall chimney paired with a 33-foot diameter solar collector and measured temperature differences of 43 degrees Fahrenheit between the collector outlet and the ambient air. That's a published number from a peer-reviewed experiment. And this is where people get excited and start building. They watch a video about passive cooling. They see a glazed tube on the side of a house, and they bolt a short glass box onto their roof over a weekend. Then nothing happens. The air barely moves. The room stays warm. And they conclude the whole concept doesn't work. It works. They just ignored both numbers. A solar chimney that's only about 3 feet tall needs an enormous temperature gap to generate any useful airflow. You'd need the air inside the channel to be 90 to 110 degrees hotter than the room just to move enough air to feel on your skin. On a mild day, you won't get that, and the system sits there doing nothing. Research published in the journal Building and Environment by Bansal, Mathur, and Bhandari back in 1993 established the foundational model for predicting solar chimney airflow, and their work made it clear that below about 7 feet of stack height, the pressure difference is too small to overcome the friction losses in the duct and the resistance of the room's layout. The air wants to move, but the force isn't strong enough to push it through the path you've given it. Here is where it stops working. If your chimney is short and your temperature gap is small, the stack effect produces a pressure difference measured in single-digit pascals. 1 pascal is roughly the force of blowing gently on the back of your hand from about a foot away. You are not ventilating a house with that. And the problem compounds because a short chimney also has less absorber area to collect solar energy, which means the temperature gap stays small, which means the already weak draft gets even weaker. Get both numbers high enough, and the system accelerates itself. Let either one fall too low, and the whole thing stalls. Now let me show you what the numbers look like when they're right. A Japanese research team led by Kaneko built a prototype solar chimney and measured it under real conditions. Their prototype produced an airflow rate between 59 and 235 CFM depending on conditions, with a daytime average of roughly 118 CFM. For context, the ASHRAE ventilation standard for a typical residential room calls for about 15 CFM per person. So 118 CFM is enough to ventilate a room with 7 or 8 people in it, driven entirely by sunlight hitting a dark wall behind a sheet of glass. Those are measured flow rates from a physical chimney, not a simulation. And here's what that airflow actually does to how warm the room feels. Moving air at even 3 feet per second across your skin lowers the perceived temperature by about 5 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit. So a solar chimney pulling 118 CFM through a room isn't just ventilating, it's changing how warm the room feels to everyone sitting in it. Kaneko's team also integrated a phase change material, sodium sulfate decahydrate, into the chimney wall. That material absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night, which means the chimney keeps generating a temperature differential even after the sun goes down. Their nighttime average was about 91 CFM. The chimney didn't stop at sunset, it just slowed down. So what happens on the worst possible day? Overcast, still, and cool. Exactly what the equation predicts. Low solar radiation means a small temperature gap. A small temperature gap in a chimney of ordinary residential height means almost no draft. The Bansal model shows a standard 10-foot solar chimney in a temperate climate dropping well below its rated performance on a heavily overcast day, producing only marginal airflow. The system becomes supplemental ventilation, not primary cooling. I ran a hospital chiller plant for years, and every mechanical system I ever operated had a day when the load exceeded the capacity. The difference with a solar chimney is that the bad day is predictable. The equation tells you exactly when the system falls short, and it's the same answer every time. Not enough sun, not enough height, not enough temperature gap. No mystery to it. That is honest information. And if this kind of building physics breakdown is useful to you, subscribe, because I cover household systems like this every week. In hot, sunny states like Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico, where solar radiation is reliable, a properly sized solar chimney with at least 10 to 13 feet of stack height is a legitimate passive cooling strategy. In the Pacific Northwest or the upper Midwest, where cloud cover is frequent and summers are mild, the same chimney is an expensive ventilation duct that works inconsistently. The people who built the BedZ development in South London understood that trade-off. BedZ is a mixed-use housing project completed in 2002. 82 homes in total, with integrated solar chimneys on every unit. The distinctive, colorful ventilation cowls on the rooftops are wind-assisted solar chimneys that drive natural ventilation through the entire building. The cowls rotate to face the wind, which supplements the thermal draft on days when solar radiation alone falls short. London is not Phoenix. It has clouds, rain, and mild summers. And BedZ's residents have been living without conventional air conditioning for over 2 decades. They didn't pretend the overcast day didn't exist. They engineered around it. The cost math is worth doing out loud. The average American household spends about $525 a year on air conditioning, per the Energy Information Administration. A residential solar chimney retrofit runs between $800 and $3,000, depending on height, glazing, and whether you're building from scratch or adapting an existing wall. Call it $1,500 for a serious build on an existing south-facing wall. That is $1,500 divided by $525. Call it 3 years to break even if the chimney cuts your cooling load in half. If it only cuts a third, you're looking at more like 4.5 years. Those are honest numbers, and the performance is not equivalent to mechanical cooling. A solar chimney does not drop a room to 68 degrees on command. It accelerates airflow, which increases evaporative cooling from your skin and makes an 82-degree room feel closer to 76. If you understand that trade-off and your climate supports it, the system earns its cost back. If you expect it to replace your AC unit, it won't. If you want to build one that actually works, here is what the research says. at least 10 feet of vertical stack height, and more is better. If you can run the shaft up through an existing attic space or along a 2-story exterior wall, you're already in the right range without adding any structure to the roof. A glazed south-facing surface paired with a dark, high thermal mass absorber wall. An air gap between the glass and the absorber of at least 6 to 12 inches, because research from Basuni and Kura in 2008 showed that widening the air gap from 4 inches to 12 inches increased airflow by roughly 25%. Intake vents on the shaded side of the house, sized to match or exceed the chimney outlet area. And if you're somewhere that gets cool nights or cloudy spells, consider putting a thermal mass or phase change material into the absorber wall so the chimney keeps pulling air after sunset. 2 variables decide whether a solar chimney cools your house or just heats your roof: stack height and temperature gap. Get both above the minimums, and the physics will move air through your house as long as the sun hits that wall. Get either one wrong, and you've built a warm glass box. The difference between those 2 outcomes is arithmetic, and now you have the numbers to check it yourself. If you want to see the other side of this, how builders in the 1700s used the same stack principle underground with buried earth tubes that cool incoming air before it reaches the house, that video is on screen now.